warm welcome. Kevin, hello. How are you today?
I'm all good from sunny Warsaw.
Excellent.
Well, not so sunny Warsaw.
So we really have got a stretch right across the West Midlands today. So we've got, I think, Kevin, you are probably furthest west on the West Midlands. And I think Carol probably in Coventry, you may be our furthest east kind of thing. I'm sort of based over in the lovely Isle of Wight, so I'm very, very lucky to be here. So a little bit out the West Midlands region, but it's great fun. So I am delighted on behalf of iSE to welcome you all to the Levering Localism webinar in our series. And we have Kevin with us. Now, I've known Kevin, I think, certainly about 10 years ago. We first probably paths crossed when I was working at Social Enterprise West Midlands. You with the Vine Trust, you and moving into the Black Country LEP. You were very prevalent, I think, with Black Country in terms of the strategic plans that were put through at the time and past. And obviously it was the first time that really social enterprise had been a sort of a byline for some LEPs or sort of front and centre. And I have to say that certainly my experience of the Black Country LEP was that they really led the way in the West Midlands around the strategic plans sort of 10 years ago. So I'm really, really delighted that we've got Kevin with us today to talk really, I guess, from two levels of experience mainly, and that's Chief Exec of the Vine Trust, which has a number of social enterprises, don't you? I don't know if you want to sort of give us a quick heads up on
I will do, yes, definitely will do, yeah.
Yeah. And then also a board member with the Black Country LEP, and you've got specific responsibility there around the sort of social economy, social enterprise sort of contribution and plan. I guess that's all kind of being revisited. So we've got a really interesting session ahead of us, I think, today. And Kevin, sort of just give us a heads up of what the social enterprises within the Vine Trust, what are they, what do they do?
Well, what I will do when I go through our conversation, I hope that will be, is give you a flavour of the things that we've been doing around education, employment and enterprise, but also hopefully reassure you that by no means, you'll probably gather this, that I'm not an expert. And I was saying to Sally, forgive me this expression I use, I'm one beggar telling another beggar where the food is at, right? And hopefully that it'll be reciprocal and that you'll be able to help me on that journey as well. But I'm basically the sort of person just that wants the place where I live, the place where my kids grow up to be a better place. And I'm a passionate believer in the Black Country, the center of the universe, the center of the Industrial Revolution, and hopefully another revolution that will be about making the place that we live a fantastic place for the next generation. But that's in general terms what I'm hopefully about. Yeah,
that's great. But I know in that heads up that the social enterprises, you cover everything, don't you, from young people, apprenticeships, hospitality, education kind of thing. So I think we'll get a really good feel for the part that social enterprises can play as place-based, local contribution, if you like, to the recovery of the economy, and obviously the value of the social economy in that. So I think there is certainly within all conversations now, I see the news, you know, people are sort of beginning to look forwards, they're beginning to make their plans, and we have a plethora of strategic recovery plans. I think I get a couple a day being thrown at my inbox or LinkedIn profile or whatever. So I think it can be quite confusing for most of us, even without COVID times, to kind of understand the interaction between the LEPs, the chambers, the West Midlands Combined Authority, the local authorities, and then we have heard of things like the Midlands Engine. Now we've got the New Midlands as a sort of a quorum group. So there's a lot going on, and I think for me, what I'm really excited about today is beginning to kind of understand through our shared conversation how social enterprises can cut through all of that and all of those strategic plans which are kind of coming out from different organisations. I know there's a big investment one which has been a collaboration through the Combined Authority, the Black Country LEP, Midlands Growth Company. That was a new one to me, hadn't heard of them, so you know, my natural thing is, well, who are they? What's their part? What's their role, kind of thing. And if we get this investment and they're looking at, you know, green technologies, green jobs, jobs for young people, and all of those really sort of key elements, I think it's, you know, how do we as social enterprises, you know, with, you know, 6 billion going into the economy, with just shy of 21,000 social enterprises across the UK, you know, we're quite powerful as a collective. But I think each one of us is looking at, what about me? How does that affect me? What can I do with my social enterprise? And I think for me, that is absolutely why listening to you around the sort of the context of the role that the LEP in Black Country have taken about really empowering social enterprise in their place-based strategy. And then, as much as that has to be adapted in current circumstances, how is that looking? What's it been? What's the 10-year journey been like? And how's that looking at playing out, I guess? So yeah, Carol, please sort of share with us. And thank you for Carol, always active on chat. So great to know that obviously the New Midlands, just reading this, New Midlands Engine think tank is something that perhaps we can have a bit more understanding of as we go through the Q&A at the end. So thank you for that. Kevin, yeah, over to you.
Great, thank you, Sally, and good morning, everyone. As I said, hopefully this will be a conversation. Hopefully this will be a bit about you learning from my mistakes, things that we're still working on, and hopefully this can be a conversation that helps us with our collective goal, because we're all, I imagine, all social entrepreneurs in this space that just want to make the world a better place, and that's my high motherhood and apple pie aim, but it's a goal which is laudable, which we've all been probably fighting for many years. What I'm going to do now, if you will, I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully, I'll just make sure I get rid of the gambling sites and the whatever else. Let's see if that will do. Do that. Okay, click here. Right. Can you see me standing in front of some chairs?
Yeah, we're all good with that.
Okay, and I'm just going to make sure I can see what I'm doing next. Wait me a second. Right. Okay. So this is me, Kevin Davis. I'm been with the Vine Trust for, goodness me, 23 years.
Wow.
Man and boy, and I haven't aged a bit, of course not. But I'm a father of 3 kids: a 15-year-old, a 11-year-old, and a fantastic 2.5-year-old who's he's not in the room at the moment, but usually he's been bumping into my Zoom meetings and Teams meetings, making his presence well known. But my wife's taking him out for a walk in the rain. Fantastic. Try and burn some of that energy off. But as you probably, your lives have been focused around working from home. I don't usually work from home in my office, which is currently mothballed for the time being. But we're making it work in between my kids jumping on the bandwidth of the internet and Netflix and stopping me from having important meetings. So it's crazy. But we're making way, and that's what we do, because we're social entrepreneurs, aren't we? We find a way where there seems to be no way. But just a little bit about my what I do. Chief Executive of Vine Trust for about the last 20 odd years. I've sat on the board of, and still do, on the West Midlands branch of Business in the Community, trying to keep them honest in the sense of reminding them about what this is about. Although you've got industrialists around the table, give some real-time examples of work that can benefit communities and have commerce work, private profit commerce working together. I was one of the co-founders of the Midlands branch of the West Midlands Schools of Social Entrepreneurs. So, you know, found Charles Rapson and appointed him and got him doing what he does now so fantastically. I work on a number of groups that support faith organisations, particularly in Black Country churches, and an organisation called Love Black Country. I've been doing that for many years, and making sure that their impact on the community continues to be positive. And I just as an FYI, probably not visiting industrial fellow, but I was at Aston. I certainly did my MBA there a few years ago, and that was part of me about trying to translate some of my learned experience into theory and validate some of that stuff, which has been very useful in terms of me developing a lot of the things that I've been doing with my social enterprise activity. Right. So in terms of that history, I said over 20 odd years. The Vine Trust was. Can you see that history timeline? Is that up on the screen?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Okay. The themes of Vine Trust are work, live, play, learn, and worship. And why we landed on those themes, because particularly when we started out in 1989, we realised that the young people that were coming into the old pub where the Vine was first started, which used to be the worst pub in Walsall, drugs, prostitution, you name it. You probably say that sounds like a great pub, but trust me, it wasn't for the people working in there. But it was got shut down by the police, and it lay dormant for some time. And a lady called Betty Deacon, who used to run the Guild for Voluntary Service, had a crazy idea. So can we convert it as a? They wanted to use the term social enterprise at the time, but it's in essence that. But what they discovered when young people were coming in, having a glass of alcohol-free booze and game of pool and whatever else, it was that they were presenting challenges about life wasn't great, not at school, not in employment, not at home, and we need some solutions to do that. And my own background, obviously, schooled in Walsall, went to university, but still had a sort of social heart and social mind, and so I offered some volunteer time into that whilst I was trying to make my career and earn lots of money. But one of the trustees came to me and says, "Kevin, do you think you could just take a year out and give us a hand and do something with it?" And I said, not sure about that. I've still got I need to earn some money and do some stuff, but I was captured by it. And then 23 years later, I'm still there. The thing that was a big challenge to us was that, as I said, trying to realize and match the issues that these young people were presenting to us from education. So we started our own initial education programs. And when they became full-time, we were required to register them as independent schools. And I set my first school up called Second Chances, and as a independent PRU, contracting with schools from across the region to work with the most challenging young people in that locality, trying to tell schools and obviously their parents and those kids themselves that life wasn't over at the age of 14, that if with some time, energy, focused support, we could move them on into education and into employment. And that then got me more focused on where to house these young people. And in our locality, around the Vine, which is now called the St Matthew's Quarter, that again was an area of decline and needed investment. And so a lot of my journey was, how could I facilitate spaces which could accommodate the growing need that we had? And so went into the whole arena of raising finance to try and build capital projects, whether that's from ERDF or social finance and the like. And then looked at setting up a number of test organisations, intermediate labour markets that would engage and employ these young people and then offer services to large companies. I give an example there of IKEA. So we worked for 10 years with IKEA, placing apprentices within all their stores in across England, Wales, Ireland, and even Mulhouse in France. A long project which helped them develop their living wage policies and about how they employed and engaged young people that particularly wouldn't have gone through their traditional recruitment procedures, which is the legacy which we're still very proud of today, which continues in IKEA's and their recruitment policies across the country. Vine developed itself as a social enterprise restaurant as well, the physical building where we obviously kept the name, the Vine, which developed our corporate name, Vine Trust. And as a sort of Jamie Oliver 15-esque sort of enterprise where you engaged and employed young people in the hospitality catering area. Very challenging market. In fact, I'd say doing the catering is probably the hardest thing that I've ever done. I've got to say it's hard work, trying to with the margins, and if you're staying true to your business model about employing a particular type of young person, it's very difficult, and that's where still my heart beats, albeit very challenging. And we've done different things from grounds maintenance for housing associations, minor construction work, things that which would develop themselves around supporting young people. But in terms of where we are today, and hopefully helps with this in terms of the place-based stuff, we constructed the Goldmine Centre in 2012. Investment that came from a number of social investment intermediaries, from future builders, community builders, social investment business, a number of organisations that believed in our vision that we could say, could the St Matthew's Quarter be part of the transformation of that particular part of Walsall, where we're based. We had lobbied at the time when enterprise zones became part of the agenda for local enterprise partnerships, that locality would be, but it wasn't approved by, I think it was DCLG or the Treasury at the time. But we managed to get Walsall to totemically agree that that locality would be a social enterprise zone. And some of it was symbolic in the sense that, you know, let's try and make this place a particular place where enterprise can work, where social issues are magnified. Didn't necessarily give us any great advantage logistically, other than just keep it on the agenda, and that's exactly what we were doing. I set up my next meaningful mainstream school called Walsall Studio School in 2013, and housed it in part in the Goldmine Centre. And we opened it up and announced that the social enterprise zone was going to happen. I then opened up further restaurants across the locality to do exactly the same thing that Vines was doing. And I also, in terms of the employment thing, which are, again, these are just headlines, developed something called the Ladder, which started out in London in response to youth unemployment, working with the Evening Standard newspaper to try and magnify the issues of unemployment, and trying to bring together different stakeholders from large corporates like Goldman Sachs and Metro Bank, down to the small plumbers in Pimlico, wherever it might be, to say, what could we do to try and tackle this issue? Translated it to the Black Country with Express and Star, then moved to their sister title in Shropshire and then Staffordshire. And in the last couple of years, we've been doing it in Greater Birmingham, but with Birmingham Mail, Birmingham Post. And for me, that campaign has been symbolic of what we're trying to do about partnership working, about trying to say, actually, what can we do together through the different partnerships to try and make life for that next generation all the better. And my sort of latest venture, which is probably our more substantial one, is our schools developed into a multi-academy trust, the Mercian Trust, which has 6 schools, a curious mix of 2 selective grammar schools, 2 comprehensive schools, a studio school mentioned, and my latest school, which is the Ladder School, which is named after the campaign we created, which is an alternative provision school. And they all are focused in part around the St Matthew's Quarter, of which that's what I'm going to be talking about in part today. So just moving on then, the localism agenda for me is obviously why I'm here. I've been asked to speak about that. And for me, it's important for us to understand that this agenda has been spoken about for a number of years now. And it's not just a thing that's just turned up out of the blue. I think 2011, was it, the Localism Act was passed. And this whole agenda about what can we do better locally, and being focused, I suppose, in the main around local and regional authorities. But for me, I think there's a level and a layer below that in which communities, groups can take ownership of particular assets, particular localities, and saying, what can we do, and focus it that beyond just having the input and investment from central government and the like. Right. Is my screen gone? Can you still see my screen? Has it gone to
the screen, but it's gone back to kind of PowerPoint mode rather than viewing presentation mode.
Okay, sorry, I want to get do that then. So it's just my notes have disappeared. Right, I can talk to him, so that's fine. So when I was thinking about this agenda, I come across this article called 5 Foundations of Real Localism. If anyone's come across it, and it talked about localism, having 5 foundations of efficiency and effectiveness, proper funding, social justice, which I think we're all agreed to, democracy and accountability, and autonomy, and a constitutional settlement. And this was written in 2010. So I said this agenda isn't a recent one, as many of you know, by a certain Ed Cox, which we'll come on to later. It was when he was working for IPP north. When I was yesterday, I come across this article written by a guy called Harry Phibbs, which contributes to, ironically, the Evening Standard, saying that Britain needs localism, and is written in the context of the this current pandemic situation, that the drive for more localized expressions of activity are even more so the case. Cited what's happening with the devolution settlement. Obviously, we're doing different things in the different devolved nations. Some would argue better in others, but clearly, as we're looking now in this current pandemic, post-pandemic situation, we are being pressed, as you can see, for more localized decisions and solutions, where it's Leicester having to shut down or go back to lockdown, as opposed to the rest of the country doing it. And it's that sort of focused, nuanced activity that is probably needed, so that local people can make local decisions for what is needed and be more responsive to the challenges that are set before us in the here and now. So topic one, I've got 3 topics today, linked to the same theme, is on what do we do to address some of these matters around leveraging and levering localism. And the first thing I want to talk about is the economy of together, and my personal vision, hopefully a wider vision, for a place-based social enterprise. I'm going to try and play a video. Hopefully this will work.
Yeah, that's all coming up nicely, Kevin. Thank you.
Right. Can you hear that?
Perfect.
Great.
We're in the business of community transformation. We've gathered together the public, the private, and the third sector together to say, what can we do to transform our community? This zone embraces the nurturing of social enterprises and social entrepreneurs with a real heart for the restoration of the local economy, one that will enable the whole community to learn, work, grow, and play together, almost like a new village for the 21st century.
Social enterprise is very important for a local economy. And what I mean by this is not for profit and profit for purpose. And what we want to do across the Black Country LEP is scale up the amount of social enterprise so that it achieves and delivers even more. Kevin Davis at the Vine Trust, shown great leadership, has set up a social enterprise zone, supporting people to set up their own social businesses. At the LEP, we thought this was such a fantastic initiative. What we've done is rolled it out right across the patch to set up a social enterprise cabinet, 8 agencies, all of us doing what Kevin does in Walsall, and scaling up what social enterprise can contribute to the economy. Accord is one of these agencies. We've got a social incubator unit over at Darlaston, and we're supporting about 40 people setting up their own social businesses at the moment.
New type of school where young people can learn not just the classics, the academics, but also how to live and work for today.
Here at Walsall Studio School in 6th form, our Social Enterprise Academy is right at the heart of our curriculum. Many of our students will have weekly work placements with social enterprises locally. Of course, young people are looking for new opportunities, and they really do need to see social change. Increasingly, of course, now they have the drive and the will to actually see it come about. Young social entrepreneurs are people who want to change the world, but they're people who are passionate about their local community. We are here to nurture, instruct, and challenge young people so that they develop their social enterprise ideas. Without support, we want to make sure that those ideas become their reality.
Our studio school is at the heart of our zone. We've encouraged entrepreneurs, large corporates to be part of what we're trying to do here in this area. Notable academic institutions are adding their value to what we're doing. We're attracting businesses to co-locate to the area. Performing arts are a key part of our zone. Also places to eat, work and play.
It's a fantastic facility right here in the centre of Walsall.
It's absolutely brilliant. I mean, the theatre's lovely. The auditorium here is just superb.
The facilities are brand new, they're functional, they're modern and very comfortable, and it is a great venue, and I think more people should know about it and come and experience what is gold mine.
The economy of together is where no one is exploited. It's an economy where everyone can live, work and play together. It's an economy where everyone is a winner, where everyone can benefit.
Okay, hopefully you got the gist of that. That particular video, as you can say, a few less grey hairs, was done back in 2014. And it was 2014, 2013, when we just opened the school up and set out our vision for what we want to do with that locality. And since that time, you mentioned the LEP at the time, and our board member at the time was Chris Handy, and from the Chief Executive of Accord Housing, and we looked at exploring what we could do to try and magnify social enterprise activity in our locality. And we did a number of conferences, brought people from Bilbao, Spain, and the like to say, how can we magnify this opportunity? And a lot of things which we did do and magnify. There's some things that we probably missed and probably wish could have happened in a different way. And in some respects, the conversation I'm having with you now is a revisiting in part of some of the ambition and goals that we had in that period. And particularly because now that I've, in effect, not taken Chris's seat, but obviously have that mantle now of looking at economic inclusion and social enterprise. But in the context of where we left off from that video, the economy of together, we've now focused it in a 10-year vision over the decade, and looking at it and actually saying, you know what could we do over this decade? And this is well before the COVID crisis kicked in. But in essence, it's a 10-year exposition dedicating to finding solutions to the fundamental challenges, in part facing our high streets, which I'll talk about later, and not just in St Matthew's Quarter, but in other localities where this message would resonate, even if they don't necessarily use that terminology. But the themes of making the place a place where people would want to work, live, play, learn and worship are the themes that we want to develop on. I'm happy to take questions with that afterwards. But in essence, it looks at how we create dynamic zones, festivals, pseudo business improvement district areas on a very local area that allows people to connect their own collective visions, entrepreneurship, aspirations, but do it not at a great cost or at a cost to the local citizens and beyond. And it's about raising ambition and aspiration across all our sectors, whether it's in education or in business alike, and the public sector for that matter. The second element of this is about how do we therefore influence the social economy. In essence, as you get in the sense of having to negotiate with government to establish a school, or to get local governments agree.
Did you say your sound has just gone a little bit blippy? Could you?
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
I don't know whether it was just a little blip on internet connection. Would you be all right to just start topic 2 again? Just. Yeah,
okay, I will do.
That's perfect, thank you.
So, moving on to topic 2, influencing the social economy and in the public and private realm. As you'd have gathered from my previous talk, part of our journey has been about how do we influence those people that have influence on the issues that we are passionate about, whether that's education, opportunities, employment opportunities. And part of that journey is having a focused, concerted effort to try and create a narrative which everybody can buy into, beyond people's misconceptions about what social economy is about. Lots of visions of what we're actually talking about, whether it's from just having charity shops on the corner or just some do-good festivals. But essentially, for me, this is fundamentally how we make a fair and equitable society, and having that discussion that enables people to do what they do well in their own sectors, but do it in such a way that through synergies that create the win-win. I'm a big person about the win-win. So when I joined the LEP, I had some questions first. Obviously, I've had some experience of the previous ambitions that we had back in 2013, 14. I need to be absolutely clear about what we were trying to do and what we're trying to achieve. I'm a pragmatist, or hope to be try to be a pragmatist, in the sense that you have to take people on a journey with you. and understand that people come from different perspectives. And so it's about what is achievable as well as what is hoped for me. But in the end, what we came up with since my appointment in May 2019, obviously well before COVID, was obviously that my portfolio wouldn't just be about social enterprise in a sort of niche way, but it would be about social mobility and inclusive growth, economic inclusive growth. Those are important factors for me, rather than just being as a sort of a niche ghettoized activity which people just touch base on from time to time, but that this was essential and core to the vision of a prosperous locality, Black Country. So we agreed that we would form a team around that with the great name of SMIG. I'm sure we'll come up with a better name for that. That would look at that. That was agreed and ratified in August of last year. And that significantly, I think this will be of interest to some of our contributors today, form a task force to help deliver the Black Country's element of the West Midlands Combined Authorities Social Economy Task Force recommendations. And I'll go through those quickly just to help you with them. So I think it was January this year, and I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong, where the Combined Authority had engaged with some eminent social entrepreneurs from our locality in the West Midlands to try and help the Mayoralty and the Combined Authority to come up with some vision for how we grow the social economy sector. And I said to our LEP, well, let's not reinvent the wheel if we're thinking about doing exactly the same thing. Let's see if we can engage in that process and see how we can translate some of those recommendations into our locality. And so we engaged with Claire Spencer, who at the time was the acting head of Public Service Reform and Inclusive Growth. The substantive head now of that is the person I mentioned earlier, Ed Cox, who wrote that report back in 2010. So he's on the table. I'm sure some of you have engaged with him. And what I'm going to go through now is just our very quick responses to the recommendations that came out. And there were 6 of them. To boost the collective identity of social enterprise by strengthening and growing its platforms. Secondly, to develop a collaborative 10-year business case for social enterprise business support. For the Combined Authorities Office of Data and Analytics to develop and disseminate a consistent approach for data collection on social enterprise. That the Combined Authority will use its convening role to encourage all public sector bodies to publicly funded projects to spend at least 5% of their commissioning and procurement budgets with social enterprise. That the Combined Authority and partners would lead a campaign to encourage closer links between social enterprises and the wider private sector. And then lastly, to work with social finance and investment partners to assess gaps, barriers, and improvements that could boost the impact of social investment. So for the Black Country, we looked at what we'd done already. So obviously, appointing me was a tick, hopefully a tick, and that we would form a task force that would be responsive to this agenda. The task force would then work and relate to what's happening at the Combined Authority level. And interestingly, in our discussion with the Combined Authority, because the Black Country LEP was the first sub-locality of the West Midlands to take this particularly seriously, we're now in conversations with them, and they're looking at us to see how we can help them, obviously more focused with the COVID situation. We're looking at business support in our area, about who are the best people to provide that support. How can we enhance the existing business support routes that are currently there at the moment to help better educate them so that they can better educate and support our sector. And integrate, which was significantly, this task force recommendations into the longer term local industry delivery plan for the LEP itself. And that was, for me, was material rather than just being another report gathering dust somewhere. And I think that approach to our other, in terms of localism, certainly with our public sector partners, is a key thing, get them into their long-term plans. our data expert in the LEP, a lady called Delma. She's currently working with the Combined Authority to find better metrics rather than just how many jobs we created and how, you know, the usual stuff which people analyze, but a useful metric that allows the capture of an inclusive economy. And we're working at the moment. A serious piece of work is being done to that end. And that was one of the things we got ratified at our recent LEP board meetings. Now, the task force from the Combined Authority had recommended 5%. When COVID kicked in, and that's when my report was and this presentation was presented to them, the consensus around the table was that 5% was too conservative. And real-time information is that we're from the public sector bodies, they're probably hitting that 5% already. So we're definitely saying we need to do considerably more on that. And figures of 25% plus are what we're looking at the moment. Sally, am I still okay? You still okay?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So we might need to be fairly brief on the Q&A, but I think absolutely fascinating, Kevin. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'll whiz through and we can come to the recommendations.
That's absolutely fine. Take your time. I think people are really quite absorbed. So
okay. What the particular thing which I thought was of interest, because as I said, some of this discussion is about trying to win hearts and minds from your local authority leaders who are sitting around the LEP to try and actually get them to see what tangibly social enterprise activity is. And one of the things that we're focused on, particularly in the St Matthew's Quarter, is there's an opportunity now, particularly in high streets, which are on everybody's agenda, particularly local authority leaders, to say they've been in decline, particularly in the Black Country for many years. What COVID has done is probably accelerated that decline. But what it's also done is focus people's minds, particularly even more so now. And so a model and approach that allows social enterprise activity, whether physically or thematically connected with that, will accelerate this collaborative localism agenda. And that's exactly what is happening in the Black Country at the moment. I'll come back to some of that in my last topic. Again, magnifying again what happened with the recommendations about a bi-social campaign of sorts, but integrating also with the opportunities with the new funding coming into through towns deals and future high street funds, etc., but using specifically the example in Walsall and also another example in Dudley. What I didn't say at the beginning, although it was alluded on my first screen, I've recently joined the board of Big Society Trust, which is the overarching entity that oversees Big Society Capital, Youth Futures Foundation, Fair Finance for All, and Access to Finance. This entity is where all the dormant bank account funds have been pulled together and used for social investment activity. And it was a role which I thought was important to go for, and obviously was glad that I was successful in being appointed, in the sense that there's a lot of good things that work has done. I mean, we've been a recipient of indirectly some of those funds, but maybe there's different ways which we can actually mobilize and add value to social finance activities and social investments and blended finance that helps us do what we do better. And I'm hoping that my appointment to that board will help us in our locality and help me garner and pull the collective wisdom of the people around the table and also traditional finance to help us make some of our dreams a reality. I'll whiz to that. So the last topic for me is emotive, hopefully not a hypothetical question. Can social enterprises save the high street? Short answer is I don't know, but we're going to have a go. And there's an opportunity for us to have a go. For St Matthew's Quarter, we're taking a 10-year view, calling it an exposition for 2020 to 2030 of those themes of work, live, play, learn, worship, and seeing what we can do around social enterprises and our activity. I'm not going to show you the video, but a TV video has been done with a TV station to say, we're going to help you and be part of that journey with you.
Together.
We are anchoring it with existing plans, which I think is important for all us to learn. Let's not just try and have a blank canvas and start again. What's already existing in place? And for Walsall, they have a master plan. And so we're trying to echo and magnify what that master plan could look like to benefit all its citizens. The 3 themes I talked about in terms of zones, again, that's not a new theme, but we've got a number of physical and thematic quarters. So we'll magnify the social enterprise quarter. We'll build on the investment that's already gone into and will come into our education quarter, £30 million investment we're doing to extend our studio school and our ladder school, but we'll integrate that with the high street and making meaningful links so that people come into the high street, not just to buy pound shop pens, but a whole diverse ecosystem that allows people to reinvent the high street beyond just what we traditionally need to do, because retail will shrink back, absolutely, but there's an opportunity for lots of new independents to come into that sector. We think ICT is a key message we need to put into that. As you all know, some of your kids at school, like mine, aren't doing what we're doing now, doing Zooms and Teams meetings, because either the hardware is not there, or the connectivity is not working, or the training amongst the kids and the staff isn't working. And there's a big focus on that as part of that. Magnify the cultural assets that are already there so that people will see it as a destination area. And yes, look for new retail as an option as well in this new 10-year period. We need to change the mood and get people to stop focusing on the decline, but look at opportunities. And for the St. Matthew's Quarter, we're looking at how we magnify those 5 themes with festivals or some more public-facing media campaigns that allow those things to be magnified. And then lastly, making sure the voices in those localities have an effective, localized impact on those localities. So it's not just a top-down thing, but it's of the people, of the different sectors. And I use the term business improvement district, which that may be the destination, but it's this principle of localized engagement, making localized decisions for the future of that locality. And my last slide, Sally, is I think we started with Ed Cox and his sort of reflections and views on localism. Some people have said localism has been problematic for some people because it still does need central government to make decisions. And if you look at the pandemic, this particular report talked about, you know, we got the homeless off the street in this pandemic period. Why couldn't we have done that over 10 years? And it does take a decision from national government to do so. So for me, it's not just about what we do on the local level. It's about, yes, magnifying our voice locally, but also informing people sitting in Whitehall, etc., to help us create that collective voice that enables us to have the economy of together that we want. And that is it. I'm open now for question and answer. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Kevin. That was amazing. So insightful, and lots of little bits of chat which sort of came up in the notice board down the bottom. A few questions. I know if everybody wants to take themselves off mute, this is sort of open Q&A really. So Latoya, you asked a question about the sort of the healthy high street, and then you sort of popped up, oh, I think I understand it. Do you want to sort of just explain where your thinking was at that moment, and maybe you can get some additional context from Kevin, perhaps? Can't hear you, Latoya.
So can you hear me a bit better?
That's a bit better, yes, thank you.
Walsall business, it was quite interesting to see that we're the healthiest place in town, so I just wanted to know how. I don't know if you know too much about Rising Stars, but we've got a warehouse full of second-hand furniture, so that is a keen interest for us. How can we get that now onto the high street? But I suppose I could talk to Kevin, and through this I wouldn't have known all that was going on. So thank you for bringing him on board and sharing that with us. So hopefully we can grow a lot more now, and with understanding the plans of the LEP. So quite proud to see that, really, Sally, going back to that.
Well, I cited Latoya and Rising Stars as a fantastic example of an innovative social enterprise making impact, and it's also homegrown. So that was that was part of my initial presentation to the LEP to get this stuff ratified.
Oh, brilliant, Kevin. Thank you very much.
And I think just echoing a note that Simon put up as well, I think we are seeing a real sort of groundswell through the high streets and maybe even people's personal buying decisions changing through COVID, because so many people, I can't get an online shop, I can't get to the supermarket because I'm shipping. Really, I know in my local community, really very, very nervous about how do I get food? And I think that was a real body shock for most of us, because it sort of came out of the blue. And yet we do see that it's the local shop, it's the local corner shop, and the independents that have in many instances kept people going. So do you think that's a sustainable change in people's buying decision? Is that part of the levering, and actually how do we, I guess, a social enterprise then sort of go, and I can support that, I can kind of cut through all the big business, all the sort of strategic plans, etc., and actually be active and do something within my local community?
Well, I mean, it's a good question, Sally. I mean, all of us here now, no doubt, I've been shopping more on Amazon and the like, and my doorbell's already rang, and hopefully my daughter's picked up my package. But equally, throughout this period, I've used my local shop when I didn't want to go through the supermarket, when everyone was worried about whether they're going to catch the disease in that way or not. And I felt very good about it. I'm hoping that we don't lose that momentum of supporting our independence. But equally, we won't go back to where we were. Yeah. And I think there will be, so in Warsaw, for example, they're investing in an online platform so that some of those local businesses can hopefully pick up where Amazon has left off, we hope. But I think that there will be that element. But I think for the high street, it'll have to be more experiential stuff and activities. That's what we talked about, mood changing stuff and festivals, which will be a challenge with COVID at the moment, in the sense that you've got to have the social distance, and how you do festivals with lots of people in footfall when you're trying to keep people apart. But I think it's, in essence, that will be a significant part of the journey that we go on. I say 10 years because 10 years is probably long enough for us to have some hope of something that is different, but we need to punctuate it with some realistic short-term and mid-term objectives as well. The jury will be out, but as I said, we're going to have a go. Certainly in Warsaw we are.
Fantastic, and really interesting to hear that sort of 10-year update from the strategic plans, and actually see that it's really gaining traction. The studio school just looks amazing. I just want to come and visit because it just looks incredible. I think that sort of grassroots of influencing young people and giving them wider options about employment and career paths, and actually how they are making their own decisions around social responsibility, social justice, social consciousness, and I think we have a real movement within many of our young people. They are interested in this, and I think, I don't know how sort of Carol asked a question about the silo kind of working and West Midlands Combined Authority. So if I kind of look at young people wanting to have a voice, social enterprises, entrepreneurs that we see here with us today in this conversation, kind of going, my micro social enterprise kind of thing, and then how do we kind of cut through, and how do we kind of work with the Combined Authority and these larger organisations? Carol, is that sort of shape a little bit around your question, or would you like to explain more yourself why you asked that question?
Yeah, I'll explain a little bit more. Yeah, it does cover most of it. And obviously, since I was the co-chair of the task force, I was aware of what was going on in Warsaw, and I was promised the report. COVID, it kind of overtook us. So it'd be great to have a chat offline, Kevin, because obviously we need to take a lot forward. It is a 10-year plan. My blog that I published this week on the New Midlands think tank is talking about the 25% on social procurement. However, I've challenged the social enterprise sector to say, how do we set up those businesses? It's great we've got Latoya here. I'm bringing someone down from Scotland to meet Latoya in 2 weeks' time, looking at how we get people into the construction industry, how we really turn those into social enterprises. But obviously the bit that I'm looking at is, you're doing some great work in Warsaw. There's some great work gone on in Birmingham. The Erdington Task Force are doing some brilliant stuff in North Birmingham, and I'm working with Whitton Lodge, and I'm working with the Birchfield Big Local to, you know, really drive that forward. But I live in Coventry, we're a social enterprise city. You know, how can we join forces to actually say this has to be across the West Midlands? And I, you know, being the task force leader, I'm really going to start driving that and holding people to account now. So my blog talked about, you signed off this, the leaders of all the local councils in the West Midlands Combined Authority signed off the report for 5%. It's great that some of them are doing it, but how do we then drive it so we up it now to 25%, not just the councils, but the NHS, you know, all the other businesses that we can really start doing and really partner together instead of fighting against each other is what I tend to see still.
And I think the thing is we want to make sure that actually we've achieved that 5% as well, don't we? And the data and the metrics, I think, you know, Kevin, you sort of talked about that a little bit as well. So we've got,
I know we haven't,
and then keep moving up from there with a great ambition of 25%, because that money spent within social enterprises, within sort of localities and within some very, very challenged communities, which is obviously the heartland of social enterprises, can be hugely transformative. So you're sort of seeing that in Walsall now that you've sort of got a bit of some benchmark data, I guess, Kevin.
No, we're still working on it. That's the honest answer, Sally. I think to answer in part Carol's question is, I think there's an onus on us from our sector to try and give our public sector partners demonstrable, tangible examples in which they can connect with. As I said at the beginning, you know, some of them been unkind to them. I think they think we're more than just charity shops and the like. But I think if they can actually see what we're doing in education, in job creation, in wealth creation, etc., etc., the stuff we're doing around digital, and not just Alex has put some comment about what they're doing, and Tin Smart doing some real innovative stuff around how we develop the next level of tech savvy young people, and hopefully they'll be doing some work with us in further work with our social enterprise zone, and already doing some work in fact with our studio school. There is that sort of tangible stuff that we can do, and I think if we can do that, it helps them. But I would say, although this terrible disease has cost people's lives and robbed some of us of our dear businesses, there is perhaps an opportunity that we can take now to say, maybe we can do something different, because there needs to be something different. I'll be interested to see what the Chancellor comes up with later today. But I think that's what we need to do. And that economy of together, that dialogue, that conversation, that we as a I know we're a homogenous community as social entrepreneurs, but we do need to keep that dialogue going so that we can try and keep fighting this good fight together.
Thank you. I'm going to sort of close the questionnaire Q&A session there. But Alex, you asked a question about the digital and tech side of things. So if I can either ask Kevin in just one moment to do a very quick, literally 1 minute response on that one, but also that we have a tech in sort of high tech in low cost and challenged environment as one of our webinars coming up in, I think it's September, if I stand to be corrected on that one. So we're well aware that, you know, tech it's fast forwarded everybody's plans to be, you know, working remotely and using new technologies, and we're all having to master the new sort of digital platforms, etc. So I think that we've recognised that the tech and the digital side of it, Alex, is a really key element. Is that very, very quickly, is there anything, Kevin, that you kind of wanted to add to that question or response to Alex?
Well, I do know Alex, and we're collaborating on a number of things around that. I mean, some of my role has been jack of all trades, master of none, probably. But one of the things in terms of I've had to learn is about tech, IT, ICT was a key part of the development of our locality. So one of the first things we did was stick fibre cable in our area when all the operators didn't want to do it. So we put our own private line in and financed it, and then shared that facility to some of the neighbouring businesses by sticking masts on our building and it would bounce the super fast broadband over. And that principle of making sure connectivity is there for all our businesses, whether it's 5G, irrespective of what people think about it, we do need to make sure that people have that capacity and understand also its applications. Again, that's the thing. We can think, how can we, if we had that facility, that opportunity, what could it do to advance the social and the economic area?
Brilliant. Thank you, Kevin. I'm going to wrap it up there because we've gone sort of a little bit over time, but absolutely so well worth it. Is it okay, Kevin, if you've got some resources that you'd like to share in the follow-up email with the final edit video link? I think that would perhaps be appreciated if that's possible.
I'm happy to do so, yeah.
Lovely. Can I say a huge thank you so much. That was absolutely brilliant. Really enjoyed it. Thank you everybody for taking some time out of your own days and organising your kids to, go to the park, go play, or sort of do some colouring or whatever it may be doing today. So thank you very much for that. A very quick heads up, our next Wise Wednesday is going to be on the 22nd of July, and it's going to be a 10 a.m. session again. It's going to be with Daniela Gina, so it's going to be all around innovation and growth, which again I think really sort of, we're getting a lovely flow between one webinar and the next one. So I will put links into that in the follow-up email. I wish you all a fantastic day, a great week, whatever you may be doing. And Kevin, thank you so much for your time. Absolutely invaluable insights for us. Thank you.
All right.
Take care.
See
you
you
soon.
Thank you. Bye.